Welcome back. We are here today still talking about the end of mental illness. I'm so proud of you for this book. It's actually my favorite book you have written, I think. I really liked Memory Rescue, but this one is very special. But before we get into what we're going to talk about today, and we continue with this, I want to read a review. I love this review. I am so thankful to have found your podcast. The information that you share with us is so incredibly helpful. I'm trying to switch over to natural products, and I'm also trying to learn how to prepare healthy meals. My kids are 14 and 16. Preparing and cooking meals has never come naturally to me. Me either. I'm embarrassed to say that my kids are poor eaters. I know it's a direct reflection on me. My goal is to learn what to put together to create a healthy meal so that my children will actually eat. Thanks again. Please keep doing what you're doing. By OC End, OC Gen or something like that. Thank you so much for that. Healthy cooking and healthy eating did not come naturally to me at all, which is why I dove into it. So we are going to enter you into a drawing for the cookbook. So the Brain Warriors Way cookbook.
You know, the reason we do this is for the reviews. And we're so excited to talk about the end of mental illness. If you pre-order the book at endofmentalillness.com, you can actually get a number of free gifts, including the introduction and first chapter immediately, even before the book is out. Be enrolled in our 6-week live class, a very special link to 6 of my top public television specials. So that's like 6 hours of learning. 50% off coupon at BrainMD on one order, and Tana's 10-day Brain Boost cookbook, all by just pre-ordering the book. We want to get this book into as many hands and households as possible. We want you to help us create a revolution. So the end of mental illness begins with a revolution in brain health. And so, like I was saying, most people see cardiologists not because they've had a heart attack, they're there to prevent them. So if we can do the same thing with brain health issues, then we're going to make a significant difference in completely changing the discussion. So for example, teenagers who sleep just 1 hour less at night than their peers have a higher incidence of depression and suicide. It's one of the main reasons when Chloe wanted to do homeschooling, I said, yeah, I'm a fan of that because it has saved her. She has gotten so much more sleep, which, and you know, she's genetically vulnerable.
Well, and when she's out late, like if she goes, you know, out somewhere with her friends and she the next day she's not herself. And so I put boundaries around that. And I'm like, you know, you can be mad at me. It's okay with me being the bad guy. You need to be home at X time because you don't act like yourself. And you can either acknowledge that or not. And she usually does. She comes around, she gets mad, and then she comes around and she's like, you know, you're right. I don't feel well.
So sleep is such a risk factor. And 60 million Americans have sleep-related problems. Gut health issues are associated with anxiety, insomnia, and brain fog. So if your gut's not right, as you've heard us say many times, your brain's not going to be right. And infections like Lyme disease can cause people to be angry, depressed, even psychotic. So it's a very special book, in part because I dedicated it to Alizé and Amelie, our 2 nieces that we've talked about. And it's very clear that they're genetically loaded for trouble. They have a family history of multiple suicides, schizophrenia, drug abuse, anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder, incarceration. I mean, they have the whole mental illness.
And that's not extended family. So it's pretty rough.
But, you know, as you've heard us talk about a lot, genes only load the gun. It's what happens to you that pulls the trigger. And unfortunately for them, they were raised in chaos with parents who struggled with addiction, domestic violence, and depression. They had multiple moves in schools. Life was unpredictable, to say the least.
Yeah, they didn't even know if they were going to have literally a roof over their head sometimes.
And 4 years ago, they were taken by Child Protective Services into foster care where yet more traumas occurred. And at the time, I'd met Alize once. I'd never met Amelie. You and Tamara, their mother, were estranged in part because of her substance abuse.
Yeah.
And
my own demons.
When we got the call from Tamara and Child Protective Services, it was the worst week of our marriage.
Yeah.
I don't remember any week as bad as that because, as a child psychiatrist, I'm not okay with them in foster care and I want to rescue them. I have a rescue dragon or responsible dragon that wants to fix people. I think that's why I do what I do. And you're like, I grew up in crazy and I'm not inviting crazy into my home.
No, let's be clear. I wanted them out of foster care, 100%. 100% hands down, we had to get them out of foster care. But you wanted to jump into something that you had no concept of. You do not know my family. You didn't grow up with what I grew up with. Now, that said, my sister was paying the price for some of my, which was already bad enough, but she was paying the price for some of the crazy I grew up with even before her. She was paying a generational price because of what I grew up with and what she grew up with. I also grew up with murder and, substance abuse and just insanity in my house. And that was just not coming into my home. I made a promise to myself when I had a child that I was not going to expose her to the same thing. That was my promise. I got out.
And so we had a hard week because I want to rescue.
And I'm like, I'm going to send you a postcard. So I love you and I will miss you.
What we agreed to do is wrap services around their mother, help her deal with Child Protective Services in a positive way rather than in the negative way she was her natural tendency.
Which getting her well was a better way to deal with the whole thing anyways.
And so we wrapped services. We became part of the children's lives. And on Mother's Day 2017, about 6 months after the kids were taken, she got the children back. And then we basically adopted them. And
as a family, we adopted them.
Here.
Yeah.
And there is no question that these children are at a very high risk for mental illness.
There's no question.
The genes and what happened in their environment, these kids are at high risk. This book, The End of Mental Illness, is our blueprint to end it in them and in their children and grandchildren. So how do you do that?
It's also the blueprint to help end mental illness in my sister, labeled mental illness, right? When in fact, it's a really important point. Because when she came into our lives, it was really hard for me, because of my triggers from the past. And my same labels came back, those people, them, addicts, whatever it was. And you were the one that went, wait, I'm not convinced it's just addiction. I'm not convinced that's all there is. There's something going on with her. And you scanned her and you went, her brain's on fire. Like her emotional trauma center is just completely lit up. She's probably self-medicating. And it's just such a different way to look at it.
So PTSD.
Erland syndrome.
ADD. Erland syndrome, which we've talked about on the podcast. And she'd been in 19 car accidents.
Right.
So evidence of traumatic brain injury, and easy to call her bad.
Harder
to go, why?
So
with the program.
But this is really important because that was what made me be able to step back and have more empathy. That one concept was why otherwise I would have been like, no, you're not coming into my house. Like, it's just not happening. And I think that's the difference between empathy and anger, honestly.
Well, and you have worked really hard with all three of them, as I have. And the exciting news is with the program, both the girls are happy. They're A students. They're social. They're no longer addicted to hot Cheetos. So do you remember the first grocery trip we
The
went
fight.
on. And, before we went into the Vons, it's a grocery store here in Southern California, I said, there's good news and bad news. And the good news is I'm only going to spend money on foods that serve your health. The bad news, it's going to take you some time to get used to them. And so
They were not happy.
They were not happy campers about that. But subsequently, they've learned how to eat right. And what we're doing is we're putting their bodies and their brains in a healing environment. Because people don't know, and you've heard me say this before, is when little girls are born, they're born with all of the eggs in their ovaries they'll ever have. And their habits will turn on or off certain genes that make illness more or less likely. These girls' ovaries, these eggs, have been assaulted by trauma, by toxins, by fear, and we're working not just for them, we're working for their babies and grandbabies.
Yeah.
And this is so important.
When we went out about a month ago and Alize ordered a plate of salmon and broccoli, I almost fell over. I was like, okay, they're catching on. It's sticking. It was amazing. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
The first time she did this, we were at Summer House in Corona del Mar. And when she ordered a salmon salad,
You're like,
the
wait a
little
second.
4-year-old in me is jumping up and down that we're making progress. So over the next couple of months, we're going to continue to talk about, well, what are the ways you did this? And I love in the book, there is a writing device that is if I was an evil ruler, because, there's a part of me that's an evil ruler, I think. If I was an evil ruler and I wanted to create mental illness in America, what would I do? And there's 62 evil ruler strategies in the book, like you're a national champion and you go to the White House and they serve you fast food. That's just insane. These incredible athletes don't eat fast food because their bodies wouldn't be the way
why would they do
did.
that?
It's like, that's just not smart. And there's also a section in the book, if I was a good ruler. And here in the public television special we have coming out the last weekend in February, so look on your local PBS station. If I was a good ruler, and here I use you as the model for the good ruler, because mothers are the health leaders.
All right, let's just be honest. Sometimes I'm a dictator, but okay.
But if I was a good ruler, well, what would I do? And I'd put calories on all the menus. So people at least had a choice to eat something that was thoughtful and calorie smart as opposed to calorie stupid. And so there's so much more we're going to talk about with the End of Mental Illness. You can pre-order it at endofmentalillness.com and get all sorts of gifts. But share this podcast with your friends. We are going to dive deep into the end of mental illness. I want you to help us end mental illness now.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.